You wake to the sound of movement, not shouting. That's what unsettles you first. The night is still, heavy, almost respectful. No alarms, no warning cries, just the soft creak of leather and the low breath of horses standing too close. You sit up as shapes detach themselves from the darkness around you. They are already inside the camp, already where they shouldn't be. A man reaches for a rifle, he never fires it. The blow that kills him is fast and practiced, delivered without anger. His body collapses into the dirt, and no one reacts, not even the ground beneath him. This is not chaos, it is procedure. Hand seize you from behind, strong, certain. Rawhide wraps around your wrists so tightly your fingers tingle, then go numb. You try to speak. The sound doesn't form. You are lifted, dragged, thrown forward onto a horse that lurches into motion before you can catch your breath. Your face slams into coarse hair and dust. The world tilts, and the camp is already falling away behind you. You look back once. There is no one coming. No pursuit, no raised voices, no signal fire being lit in the distance. The people who could have saved you are already dead or already running. The land opens wide ahead, dark and endless, swallowing the path you are being forced onto. This is when the truth begins to surface, quiet and unmistakable. You are not being taken to be traded. You are not being taken to be ransomed. No one is counting the days until your return. The riders move with relentless speed, riding hard through the night as if distance itself is a weapon. Your wrists burn against the rawhide. Your body starts to ache in places you didn't know could ache. Hunger arrives early. Thirst follows close behind. No one offers you food or water. They don't need to. This journey is not about arrival. It's about erasure. Survival, you begin to understand, does not mean freedom. It means continuation under different rules. The land changes as the hours pass, grass giving way to scrub, scrub to rock, rock to open plain. The moon offers no comfort, only exposure. Each mile strips something from you, your name, your language, the certainty that pain ends when someone notices it, the idea that endurance earns mercy. These men are calm, focused, efficient. There is no rage in what they're doing. That is what makes it unbearable. Rage burns out, systems don't. You are crossing a line that cannot be uncrossed. Even if your body survives what comes next, the life you came from will continue without you. People will search, they will hope, they will wait, but you are already being carried beyond the possibility of return. This is not imprisonment. Prisons have walls. Walls imply an outside. This is social death. A punishment where escape does not mean restoration, and survival does not mean you get your life back. Some punishments are not designed to kill you. They are designed to make sure that even if you live, you never truly return. If stories like this unsettle you, if they make you uncomfortable enough to keep listening, then you already understand why this channel exists. Subscribe to the darkest punishments in history so these stories aren't buried again. And if you choose not to, explain why in the comments. Silence has erased enough victims already. What is happening to you is not personal. That realization comes slowly, and when it does, it is worse than fear. The men riding beside you are not improvising. They are not reacting. They are participating in something older than memory, something refined by repetition. What took you from the night was not rage or revenge. It was an economy in motion. On this frontier, wealth does not sit still. It moves on 4 legs. It breathes. It bleeds. Horses are the backbone of power here: speed, survival, status, dominance. Entire bands rise or fall based on how many they can seize, breed, or trade. But horses alone are not enough. Horses must be fed, cared for, replaced when they die, and that requires labor, endless labor. That is where you come in. Women are not taken as prisoners. They are taken as infrastructure, as labor units that walk, carry, scrape, dig, cook, haul, give birth, and continue working until their bodies fail. Children are taken not out of mercy but foresight, raised young enough they can be reshaped, taught new words, new loyalties, new memories. They become assets that grow in value over time. This is not chaos. This is supply and demand. Ransom, the idea you might still be clinging to, is a gamble most raiding parties have no interest in. Ransom requires negotiation, time, trust. It requires the captor to believe the other side will pay and the captive to survive long enough to be exchanged. Too many things can go wrong. A rescue party could form, soldiers could follow, disease could take you before payment arrives. Ransom freezes wealth in place. This economy does not reward patience. A woman who can work immediately has value now. A woman who can bear children has value later. A child who can be molded has value for life. These are predictable returns. Ransom is not. That is why most captives are never meant to leave. There are exceptions, but they follow lines that have nothing to do with compassion. Spanish and Mexican captives, for example, often exist within a different market. Long-standing trade routes stretch south, beyond the frontier, into territories where human beings can be exchanged quietly for goods, weapons, or silver. Captives taken from those settlements are more likely to be sold onward, disappearing into systems that leave no records behind. Anglo captives are different. They come from communities that organize searches, that raise militias, that send soldiers. They are dangerous to hold onto as bargaining chips. Keeping them too long invites retaliation, and retaliation threatens the economy itself. So the solution is simple. Absorb them or erase them. Those who adapt, who survive the initial breaking, are folded into the system. Their labor replaces the need for further raids, at least temporarily. Those who resist too visibly, who weaken too quickly, who slow the movement of the group are removed, quietly, efficiently, without ceremony. You begin to understand now why no one looked back when the camp disappeared behind you, why there was no shouting, no celebration. This was a transaction completed at speed. And you were the commodity. If you are listening to this and thinking of conquest or savagery or easy labels that make this comfortable to digest, resist that impulse. This is not a story about monsters. It is a story about systems that work, systems that reward what is useful and discard what is not, systems that do not require hatred to function. That is what makes them endure. If this is the moment you realize how calculated this was, how intentional, then stay with this story. Subscribe to the darkest punishments in history so these systems are exposed, not simplified. And if you won't subscribe, say why in the comments. Because turning away from how punishment actually works has always been part of what allows it to continue. The ride does not slow. And now that you understand the economy you've been taken into, the next question becomes unavoidable. When you arrive, what will you be worth? The answer to that question was decided long before you were bound. It was decided in the first seconds of the raid, when the attackers moved through the settlement with a speed that left no room for hesitation. What looked like violence was actually sorting. What felt like terror was assessment. Selection happened immediately. Adult men were never meant to survive, not because of hatred, but because they represented risk. A grown man could organize pursuit. He could track across open land. He could rally neighbors, soldiers, militias. Even wounded, even unarmed, he carried the possibility of retaliation. So he was removed first, quietly if possible, quickly if not. His death was preventative, not punitive. The elderly followed for the same reason, though the logic was colder. They could not ride fast. They could not endure forced marches. They consumed food without producing labor. In a moving system, anything that slowed momentum became a liability. Liabilities were not transporting. They were left behind, or they were killed where they stood. Efficiency required it. Infants were the most dangerous of all. Not because they could fight, but because they could cry. A single sound carried across open prairie farther than most people understood. A crying child could undo an entire raid. It could draw pursuit. It could expose a camp at night. It could turn profit into disaster. So infants were rarely taken. Some were killed immediately. Others were abandoned, left to die of exposure once the riders moved on. The calculation was brutal, but it was consistent. Silence was survival. Children old enough to walk, but too young to resist, occupied a narrow margin. If they could keep pace, if they did not slow the group, if they did not collapse under exhaustion, they might be taken, not out of mercy but potential. A child young enough could be reshaped, language replaced, memory blurred, identity overwritten. They were long-term investments, assets that could grow into workers, spouses, or warriors. But the most valuable targets were always women of reproductive age. Not because they were rare, but because they served multiple functions at once. They could labor immediately, carry water, process hides, gather fuel. They could bear children who would belong entirely to the captor's world. They could be traded to other bands for horses or weapons if surplus demanded it. One body, many uses. Age mattered, health mattered, visible strength mattered. Injuries were assessed quickly. A woman who limped, who appeared sick, who showed signs of weakness might not survive the initial days. Those who seemed resilient were marked without ceremony, not spoken to, not acknowledged, simply taken. This was triage. The raid did not end when the shooting stopped. It ended when the group reached optimal load. Too many captives slowed movement, too few made the risk pointless. Everything in between was calculation. The dead were left where they fell. The taken were distributed among horses, and the riders moved on before grief could organize itself into resistance. From the outside, it looks like cruelty without reason. From inside the system, it was restraint, discipline, a method refined over generations to extract maximum value with minimum loss. And once you understand that, the horror deepens. Because nothing about this depended on impulse. No one lost control, no one snapped. The suffering that followed was not an accident, it was built into the design. If you're listening to this and telling yourself that this is too much, that you didn't expect it to be this deliberate, remember this moment. Remember how quickly people were reduced to categories. Remember how clean the logic was. If you believe these stories deserve to be remembered in full, not softened, not excused, subscribe to the darkest punishments in history. And if you won't, explain yourself in the comments. Because the first step in every system like this has always been deciding whose suffering is worth acknowledging. The selection is over. Now comes the march. The march begins before you understand that it has begun. There is no announcement, no transition. One moment you are captured, the next the ground beneath you is moving away mile by mile, and your body is being dragged into a rhythm it did not choose. The pace is relentless, not a sprint, not a stroll, something worse. A speed calculated to exhaust without killing, fast enough to prevent pursuit, slow enough to preserve what they intend to keep. Your wrists are still bound. Rawhide cuts deeper with every step, swelling flesh pressed against unforgiving leather. Blood slicks your skin, dries, cracks, and bleeds again. The bindings are not loosened at night. They are not loosened for sleep. They stay because pain is instructional, because numbness teaches obedience faster than words ever could. You stumble and the horse beside you does not slow. You are dragged upright by the rope, forced back into motion. Falling is not permitted. Rest is not an option that exists anymore. The land offers no shelter. The sun rises without mercy, burning down on exposed skin until it blisters and peels. When night comes, the temperature drops hard and fast, stealing warmth from bodies already weakened. There is no fire for you, no blanket, no acknowledgement that you are cold. Exposure does its work quietly, hollowing you out from the inside. Food does not come when hunger begins. It comes when hunger has already changed you. Your stomach cramps, twists, gnaws at itself. The ache becomes sharp, then dull, then constant. Water is rationed sparingly, sometimes withheld entirely. Lips split, tongues swell, thoughts slow. Thirst begins to replace fear until it is all you can think about. This is intentional. Hunger and dehydration soften resistance. They collapse the will inward. They make the mind small. The march is not just movement through space. It is movement away from yourself. Your body starts to betray you. Muscles weaken. Balance falters. The pain in your feet becomes a single, unbroken sensation, as if the ground itself is cutting into you with every step. Shoes fail. Soles tear. Bare skin meets stone, thorn, heat. You stop reacting to pain because reacting takes energy you no longer have. Time becomes unreliable, days blur, nights stretch. You lose track of how far you've come, only that the distance behind you is now impossible to cross in reverse. This is when the psychological collapse begins, not with screaming, but with silence. You stop asking questions. You stop imagining rescue. You stop thinking in terms of before and after. Your world narrows to the next step, the next breath, the next moment you are allowed to remain upright. Your name feels distant. Your past feels theoretical. The person you were before the march becomes someone you once heard about, not someone you remember being. They watch this happen. Not closely, not emotionally. They have seen it before. They know when a captive has crossed the threshold, when fear gives way to resignation, when resistance collapses under exhaustion, when the mind begins to detach from the body as a survival mechanism. This is the point of the march, not transportation, transformation. By the time the camp comes into view, if it comes into view at all, you are already different, not broken entirely, but softened, opened, ready to be shaped. If you are still listening at this point, if you haven't turned away from what this process actually looks like, then you understand why these stories matter. Subscribe to the darkest punishments in history so the mechanics of suffering aren't reduced to footnotes. And if you choose not to, say why in the comments. The march only works when no one is paying attention. You are still moving. And what waits at the end of this journey is not relief. You know you have arrived before anyone tells you. The air changes first. Smoke hangs heavier here, layered with the smell of sweat, animals, old fires that never quite go out. Sounds emerge, voices, movement, the dull rhythm of daily life continuing without pause. No one rushes. No one looks surprised. Your arrival has been anticipated. The riders slow at last. You are pulled from the horse without ceremony. Your legs struggle to remember how to hold you. Blood rushes painfully back into numb feet. The ground feels unstable, unreal. You sway, and hands shove you forward before you can fall. This is not a reception. It is an announcement. People begin to gather, not warriors returning from a raid, but women, children, elders, entire families. They form two lines without being told, facing one another, leaving a narrow corridor of trampled earth between them. Some hold sticks. Some carry clubs. Others grip leather straps, switches, whatever happens to be close at hand. You understand then that this is not punishment. This is introduction. You are pushed into the corridor. The first blow lands before you can brace yourself. A sharp strike across the shoulder that steals your breath. Another follows immediately, then another. Pain erupts from every direction, arms, back, ribs, legs. The strikes are not coordinated, but they do not need to be. You are meant to move, to run if you can, to stumble forward while the village bears witness. This is the gauntlet. Children participate, women participate, elders participate. The violence does not belong to one person, it belongs to the group. That is the point. By the time you reach the end, there will be no doubt about where you stand in the social order. You try to shield your face. A blow catches your wrist instead, sending fire through already damaged flesh. You cry out despite yourself, and the sound draws laughter from somewhere to your left. Shame burns hotter than pain. You realize with sudden clarity that suffering here is not private. It is communal, observed, reinforced. You fall. Hands grab you not to help, but to force you upright. The blows continue until you move again. Stopping is not allowed. Resistance is not expected. Endurance is the only acceptable response. This ritual serves a purpose deeper than cruelty. Pain teaches you your limits. Shame teaches you your place. By involving the entire community, the ritual removes ambiguity. Everyone sees what you are now. Everyone understands what is permitted to be done to you, and you understand it too. Your body absorbs the lesson faster than your mind ever could. When the gauntlet ends, there is no comfort waiting, no pause, no acknowledgement that you survived it. You are left where you collapse, breathing hard, bloodied, shaking. Around you, life resumes. Fires are tended, Children return to their games, conversations pick up where they left off. Your suffering has been absorbed into the rhythm of the camp. This is the moment when captivity becomes ownership. Not because of the blows, but because of the audience. Because you have been stripped not just of control, but of privacy. Pain can be endured. Shame alters how you see yourself. It rewrites identity. It teaches you to internalize your position without being reminded. You are no longer someone who has been taken. You are someone who belongs to this place now. And tomorrow, the work will begin. And tomorrow begins the labor. The women rise before dawn, their bodies already bruised from the gauntlet, their limbs still carrying the memory of strikes. They do not speak of it. Speech is unnecessary. The rhythm of the camp, the rhythm of survival, takes precedence over complaint or grief. Water first. Buckets are drawn from wells or carried from distant streams. The weight is constant. The distance, measured not in steps but in endurance. A slip, a spill, an empty bucket, punishment follows, not dramatic, not ceremonious. A sharp reminder that imperfection carries consequences. Hides are next. The dead animals, flayed and salted, are tugged, dragged, beaten into submission by hands both calloused and trembling. The air reeks of smoke and iron. Fingers bleed, backs ache, knees throb. Every motion is repeated until the body forgets its own limits, until muscle memory eclipses thought. There is no slowing for exhaustion. There is no pause for pain. Fuel must be gathered, cut, stacked. The women move through forests and thickets, snapping saplings, cracking branches. Even in winter, when the cold bites and frost cracks the skin, the work continues. They return with arms blistered, hands scarred, and eyes hollow. The punishment is not optional, it is inescapable. Food preparation follows, grinding grain, stirring stews, kneading dough. Hours spent bending over stones, pounding, crushing, mixing. The smoke stings, the heat presses down. The hands that bring sustenance are the same hands that bear blows without ceremony, yet any mistake is noticed. Any mistake invites sharp correction, words, gestures, implements of discipline. Pregnancy changes nothing. Illness does not excuse absence. Age does not lessen demand. A woman who falters, who slows, who fails even in the smallest measure, is met with pain and censure. The punishment is a teacher, not a spectacle. It is woven into the rhythm of labor. It does not demand witnesses beyond those already watching, beyond those whose survival depends on the exacting order of daily toil. The work itself becomes the gauntlet. Each repetition, each weight carried, each movement repeated until the joints protest, is a lesson in obedience and endurance. The body learns faster than the mind, faster than fear, faster than hope. It internalizes its own position, its own limits, its own smallness within the collective. There is no glamour here. There is no glory. Only the relentless cadence of labor and the quiet, omnipresent authority of pain. And yet the labor is not mindless. It is precise. It is a language. Every motion communicates rank, capability, and place within the hierarchy. Each woman learns the cost of imperfection through the ache of her limbs, through the sharp sting of correction, through the silent scrutiny of the community. By the end of the day, the women are shells of themselves, sweat and blood, bruised and trembling, but the lesson has been absorbed, not through words, not through ceremony, not through fear of spectacle, but through the relentless, methodical imposition of responsibility, through the punishment embedded in routine. They do not speak of belonging, they do not speak of submission, they do not need to. The community sees, the women see, their bodies remember what their minds have yet to fully comprehend. This is not cruelty for cruelty's sake. It is the architecture of social order. Pain, repetition, endurance, they are the pillars. Shame, compliance, visibility, they are the walls. And within these walls, each woman learns her place, not as an exception, not as a unique individual, but as an indispensable, interchangeable, observable part of the whole. The sun sets, the tasks are completed, fires are tended, grain is stored, water replenished. The village exhales, but the women do not. Their labor has no closure. There is no rest that undoes the day's lessons. Their suffering is quiet, cumulative, invisible to those who do not look closely. And tomorrow, the cycle begins again. Because this is how ownership is reinforced, not through spectacle, not through singular acts of brutality, but through repetition, through the quiet, persistent insistence that every action, every breath, every motion exists not for the self, but for the collective I. And within that, identity is not reclaimed, it is overwritten. The sun barely rises before tension begins to weave itself through the camp. The women who survived yesterday's gauntlet are not free. They are no longer simply laborers. They are threats, visible markers of power, potential challenges to the fragile hierarchy that governs every motion, every breath within the enclosure. The captives are watched by those who were once equals, by those who were once allies, now enemies in the invisible war of survival. Jealousy takes root. Authority must be maintained. One woman's endurance is another woman's humiliation. Small slights, imagined betrayals, the way a body bends under burden or stands too tall despite it, all are noted. Eyes follow, hands twitch with correction, whispers coil through the rows of tents and hearths. Violence is not spontaneous, it is not rage, it is method, it is control. Women are tasked to punish one another, to enforce rules, to assert dominance, to remind every observer that rank is not a matter of physical strength alone. The blows are precise, deliberate, firebrands sear skin, knives nick, hot coals press into flesh, and scars are left to speak when words fail. The marks are permanent, undeniable. They are history written onto bodies. Every act of cruelty is a lesson. Every mark is a declaration. You exist within this system, and the system owns you. Pain teaches loyalty, loyalty enforces survival, and survival maintains the hierarchy. This is female-on-female violence, not passion, not spite, but necessity. It complicates every moral expectation. Sympathy is a luxury, compassion is weakness. Even the captives who endure, who wield the punishments, are prisoners of a structure that leaves no room for individuality. And yet the cruelty is visible. The community watches. Every line of fire-scorched skin, every jagged scar, every trembling of muscle as it is forced into submission is part of the lesson. Not for spectacle, not for drama, but for clarity. Obedience is survival, observation is survival, and the cost of defiance is written in flesh. Here identity fractures, sisterhood becomes rivalry, solidarity is extinguished under the weight of enforced hierarchy. Even the act of witnessing another's suffering is a form of participation. Every glance compounds complicity. Every sigh, every gasp, every quiet scream reinforces the unspoken law: you belong or you break. And for those of you watching, reading, consuming this story from a safe distance, ask yourself this: if you benefit from seeing suffering unfold without consequence, without intervention, without acknowledgement, are you not part of the system too? Bell. You are witnessing labor, pain, endurance, without giving anything back to truth, to exposure, to understanding. Every view, every like, every moment spent watching without action is free labor for the captors, free benefit for those who enforce hierarchy. If you have not subscribed, not engaged, not confronted this reality fully, ask yourself, are you just another observer, a silent participant, silently profiting? Comment below if you think this is true. Speak, even if it makes you uncomfortable. The fire dies down, but the marks remain, permanent, visible, inescapable, and the women return to the rhythm of the camp, each scar a testament to the twisted logic of authority, each action a reminder that control is never relinquished, only shifted. Tomorrow the labor will begin again, and the hierarchy will tighten its grip, shaping bodies, minds, and even the ethics of those forced to live under it. Even as the camp settles into the rhythm of labor, there is another layer, quieter but no less absolute: control over bodies, not as partners, but as property. Sex here is never intimacy, never connection. It is a measure of ownership, a way to assert dominance, a way to bind one person to another not through affection, but through obligation. Every encounter is observed, every choice circumscribed by hierarchy. Consent is irrelevant. Escape is impossible. Privacy does not exist. Some arrangements appear informal, but the illusion is hollow. A woman walking beside a man may seem unmolested, free to move, free to choose, but freedom is an artifact. Every glance, every touch, Every moment is filtered through the gaze of authority. What appears voluntary is often survival. What appears comfort is often compliance. Forced unions are rare in spectacle but constant in practice. A command is given, a body obeys. Pregnancy follows in some cases, and the community notes it as value. A womb that bears life under captivity is a resource, a symbol of endurance, an asset to be managed. But liability is equally present. Illness, exhaustion, or failure to conceive is punished with as much rigor as a laborer who drops a bucket or a girl who bends too slowly under weight. Protection is absent. Safeguards do not exist. Harm inflicted in these unions is rarely accidental. The law of the camp places responsibility on the individual to endure, on the body to submit, and on the hierarchy to enforce. Pain, shame, and the absence of agency become tools, shaping behavior before the mind has time to register resistance. And still life continues around these acts. Children run past, fires burn, water is drawn, grain is stored. Labor does not pause for cruelty, and cruelty does not pause for labor. The acts themselves are matter of fact, woven seamlessly into the fabric of daily survival. Pregnancy is neither celebrated nor mourned. It is accounted. The body is measured not for its comfort, but for its output, for its capacity to contribute to the structure of possession. The child, when born, is immediately inscribed into the hierarchy, a new unit within a system that observes, notes, and enforces from the first breath. In these moments, identity is stripped further. The body is no longer solely one's own. Desire, comfort, and preference are irrelevant. Every action, every restraint, every union is a statement. Ownership is total, and compliance is mandatory. And the lessons extend beyond the immediate. Every woman observes. Every child observes. Every pair is a demonstration of what is expected, what is permitted, and what is irrevocably denied. Survival does not soften cruelty, it perpetuates it. Observation is not passive, it is a method of conditioning. Even those who do not participate directly internalize the hierarchy. Here shame is not private, pain is not temporary. Identity is rewritten slowly, meticulously, in ways that cannot be undone. Every body, every encounter, every imprint on flesh becomes part of a living, breathing ledger of control. And for those watching, who witness suffering without understanding its mechanics, ask yourself, is knowledge without action anything more than silent complicity? Every view, every moment of curiosity, without support for truth, is another hand in the system. Your gaze, if unexamined, is part of the ownership itself. Tomorrow the labor will continue. The hierarchy will tighten. The lessons of endurance, of visibility, of possession will deepen. And the body, like the mind, will learn its place, not through romance, not through desire, but through the unrelenting architecture of control. The birth of a child in the camp is not celebrated. It is calculated. Every infant is assessed, not for its life, but for its utility. A newborn may be considered an asset if it strengthens a household, if it increases the labor force, if it extends the reach of control. Or it may be deemed a liability, too weak, too burdensome, too costly in attention, too dangerous in drawing sympathy where none is permitted. Infants are often abandoned. They are left to the elements, to the forest, to the small mercies of survival outside the rules of the camp. Some are killed quietly, without ceremony, without acknowledgement. The act is not motivated by cruelty alone. It is strategy, efficiency, the eradication of potential weakness. Motherhood exists here only as a calculation of productivity. A woman cannot slow, cannot pause, cannot grieve openly. She may feed her child if she is permitted, but her labor must not waver. The bucket she carries, the grain she pounds, the fire she tends, these continue regardless of her body's condition, regardless of her heart. Every missed task invites correction, every hesitation invites discipline. Separation is itself punishment. To watch a newborn removed, taken from her arms before she has learned the rhythm of holding, to hear a cry she cannot answer, to feel the weight of the child's absence pressed into her chest, this is psychological torment. It pierces deeper than any physical blow. It is invisible, silent, unrecorded, yet it is relentless. Long after the child is gone, the memory of absence lingers. Muscles remember the lift of a body no longer there. Skin remembers the warmth that vanished. Every task, every motion, every enforced smile carries the echo of the child's absence. The mind fractures under repetition of duty while the heart is tethered to loss. This devastation is intentional, though it is rarely acknowledged. The hierarchy does not only seek obedience, it seeks reshaping of identity. Motherhood becomes a vector of control, an instrument for enforcing the structure of ownership over bodies, over hearts, over futures. The lesson is clear. Attachment is dangerous. Love is vulnerable. To care is to invite suffering. Over time, these lessons embed themselves. Mothers learn not to hope. They learn to moderate grief to fit the rhythms of labor. They learn to observe their children from a distance, if the children survive at all, and to measure every moment of closeness against the consequences of attachment. Emotional devastation is mapped onto the body through exhaustion, scars, trembling, and the quiet, unspoken tally of loss. And the children who do survive are themselves ensnared within this system. Their presence reinforces hierarchy, reminding the women who birthed them that compliance is necessary, that observation is compulsory, and that even the act of creation does not grant freedom. They are living instruments of control, passive yet devastatingly effective in enforcing the lessons of endurance, submission, and visibility. Here identity fractures again. Motherhood, once a source of purpose, becomes a vector of punishment. The heart is reshaped by labor, by surveillance, by enforced separation. Suffering is absorbed silently, woven into the fabric of every day. And yet, the cycle is perpetuated. Those who survive teach the next generation, whether through example, through observation, or through the unrelenting rhythm of work and punishment. And for those watching, who read these accounts from a distance of safety, remember this: witnessing suffering does not absolve complicity. Every click, every pause, every moment spent observing without acknowledgement of the truth is a moment where free labor, free suffering, and free control are normalized. To witness is not neutral. To witness without acting, without supporting truth, is to participate. Tomorrow, as the labor continues, as the children of the camp grow under observation, as the mothers endure, the lessons of control, endurance, and invisibility will deepen. The architecture of ownership is never static. It is built daily, with each infant abandoned, each mother punished, and each observer complicit in silence. Time passes, but it does not heal. The women who arrived as captives, as outsiders, begin to fade into the rhythm of the camp. Words they once spoke, dialects that carried the music of their homeland, vanish from their lips. Language, the vessel of memory and thought, erodes under constant repetition of commands, the endless monotony of labor, the enforced vocabulary of the captors. Conversation becomes functional, stripped of nuance, emotion, and history. Names are lost first. A woman is no longer the person she once was. Her original name is whispered only in memory, if at all, and is replaced with a new label, a word that identifies her not as a daughter, not as a sister, not as herself, but as a function within the camp. The syllables are stripped of softness, of belonging, of heritage. They are a reminder: who you were is irrelevant, who you are now is dictated. Cultural markers vanish next. Clothing is replaced. Hairstyles are reshaped. Rituals, practices, even the cadence of daily life that once connected the captive to family or homeland are forbidden or rendered meaningless. The camp dictates behavior, language, labor, and movement. The women move in ways that no longer belong to them. They move as the camp requires, as the hierarchy demands. Emotion itself is realigned. Memories of home, of family, of autonomy are dangerous. They are softened, reshaped, punished. Attachment to the past becomes guilt. Attachment to hope becomes risk. Women learn to respond first to commands, to observation, to expectation. Their hearts bend not toward reunion, not toward self-preservation in its original form, but toward compliance, toward survival within the imposed identity. Some resist. Not all are erased immediately. Some cling to the memory of a life before captivity, to the hope that rescue will return them to themselves. But even rescue is complicated. The camp has reshaped reflexes, desires, and perception. Some women, when offered the chance to leave, hesitate. They pause, uncertain of which life belongs to them. Survival has demanded adaptation. Their bodies, trained to obey, have forgotten autonomy. Their minds, punished for dissent, have internalized the hierarchy. Returning home is no longer instinctive, it is terrifying, it is unfamiliar. This is the slowest, most insidious form of control. The gauntlet of the first day, the labor, the sexual control, the maternal devastation, they are acts of visible horror. They leave marks, bruises, scars. They can be documented, described, endured. Identity erasure is invisible. It is the hollowing of memory. It is the quiet collapse of self into function. It is the replacement of past with present, heart with compliance, hope with alignment. It is existential horror, far beyond the reach of any strike or scar. You survive the blows, the labor, the humiliation, but you may no longer recognize yourself when you look in a mirror. You may no longer recognize the world when it reaches beyond the camp. And the horror lies in the permanence. No blow can compare to the silent theft of language, of heritage, of name, of memory. No punishment can match the slow, careful reshaping of mind and heart. The women live, but the selves they brought with them are gone. And for those watching, those who witness these stories of survival and endurance from safety, ask yourselves, if the mind can be stolen so quietly, so completely, what responsibility do you bear to recognize the truth? Bell to consume suffering without acknowledgement, without support, without action, is to witness the erasure of identity as a spectator. To be aware is to be responsible. To ignore is to participate in the horror. In this camp there is no turning back. The past becomes myth, the self becomes function, and the human heart bends to fit the architecture of control. Escape, even if physically possible, may be impossible psychologically. Rescue cannot restore memory. Freedom cannot restore identity. And for those who survive, the line between self and imposed role is blurred forever. Existential horror replaces physical horror. Pain was immediate. Labor was visible. Punishment could be felt. Identity erasure is perpetual, relentless, unrecorded, and unending. It teaches compliance, reshapes behavior, and constructs a new person, one who may walk among the living yet be lost to herself entirely. The rhythm of the camp continues. Names are spoken that no one remembers. Labor is performed with precision, no longer linked to desire. Observation and endurance dictate reality. Identity, once a shield, once a language, once a comfort, has been repurposed into obedience. And in that repurposing, the most complete, invisible, and enduring horror of all is realized. Rescue is not salvation. Those who arrive with the promise of freedom often find death instead. Arrows loosed from hidden hands, fires set in haste, blades swinging where expectation meets reality. The camp responds to disruption not with negotiation, but with precision. Any attempt to remove a captive without permission is a threat, and threats are extinguished immediately. Those who survive are fewer than those who perish, and survival carries a cost far beyond the flesh. Some women, conditioned over years of labor, observation, and identity erasure, resist even rescue. They hesitate when the opportunity arises, clutching the routines that have become their identity, even as freedom beckons. The camp has rewritten desire. Safety has become foreign. Autonomy has become frightening. And the hands that reach to pull them away are met with instinctive resistance, not because of loyalty to captors, but because the captives no longer know who they are outside the enforced order. Families who reclaim women from captivity often do not find the daughters, the sisters, the mothers they remember. They find strangers molded by pain, endurance, and obedience. Recognition is partial, hope is incomplete, and reconciliation is stunted by years of psychological restructuring. The body returns, but the self has been overwritten. Eyes that once glimmered with memory now reflect survival alone. Words, once familiar, sound foreign. Familiar gestures seem awkward, even alien. Return does not restore community. It does not erase scars. It does not reverse identity erasure. Instead, social rejection follows. The liberated may be viewed with suspicion, regarded as changed, as tainted, as something outside the rules of home. The camp's imprint lingers longer than chains ever could. Women who survive, who escape, who are reclaimed, are often alienated. The world they left has moved on. The world they re-enter does not recognize them. And in their own minds, recognition of self is incomplete. There is no happy ending here. The narrative of survival, of escape, of rescue as triumph, collapses under the weight of lived reality. Death is not the only punishment. Identity lost, autonomy restructured, and social rejection achieved what the gauntlet never could. It made survival itself a haunting. And yet observers watching from a distance often expect closure. They expect liberation to feel like victory. They expect the narrative to satisfy a need for justice. But history and human cruelty rarely conforms to expectation. Witnessing the consequences of captivity, whether death, compliance, or unwanted return, is uncomfortable because it forces confrontation with the true mechanics of control. Freedom without understanding is as perilous as captivity itself. Survival may grant life, but it does not restore what was taken: innocence, identity, trust. To be returned to the familiar is sometimes more devastating than remaining within the known confines of enforced hierarchy, where every motion, every breath, every decision has a predictable consequence. And for those observing, still perched in safety, still consuming the story, ask yourself, do you cling to the myth of the happy ending because it comforts you, or because reality is unbearable? Well, every pause, every scroll past, every disengaged moment is a silent endorsement of the camp's lessons. Suffering exists, control is absolute, and survival does not equal restoration. To witness without confronting the truth is to privilege myth over reality. The women who survive, whether within the camp or beyond its walls, carry horror as their inheritance. Freedom, when granted, is not relief. Rescue, when achieved, is not triumph. Return, when permitted, is not redemption. The architecture of control is not dismantled by escape. It persists in memory, in body, in the way a glance follows, in the way reflexes obey, in the way identity has been rewritten to align with endurance rather than choice. Existence itself becomes the ongoing gauntlet, where every day, every interaction, every expectation is a continuation of control. And the myth of liberation, of being saved, is exposed as the final, cruelest illusion. Some women never return. They leave the camp not as captives, but as ghosts. Some are sold south, their lives reduced to transactions in distant markets, bartered for profit, carried into territories where no one remembers their names, no one records their faces, no one charts their existence. They vanish from the maps of memory as completely as they vanish from the camp. Others die in the chaos of counter-raids, caught between warring forces, shot, stabbed, burned. Their deaths are not documented. Their bodies are not mourned. They are swallowed by history as if they never existed, erased by circumstance and neglect alike. Some disappear quietly. They are taken by disease, by exhaustion, by labor too heavy for bodies already broken. Their names are forgotten even within the camp. Their stories are left untold. Even survival within their final hours cannot be confirmed. They are absent, invisible, untouchable. This is the final lesson of captivity. Not the blows, not the scars, not the labor, not the erasure of identity. Finality is found in silence. To vanish without recognition, to leave no trace, to be forgotten by both captors and observers alike, is perhaps the most complete punishment of all. History itself becomes a tool of domination, because to erase memory is to erase life. And for those watching now, who scroll through darkness safely, who witness the fate of others without engaging, consider this your complicity. Forgetting, turning away, remaining unaccountable is not neutrality. It is a second death for those who have already suffered, to watch and not act. To consume knowledge without acknowledgement is to participate in their erasure. If you have not subscribed, if you have not confronted the truth fully, ask yourself, are you choosing ignorance? Are you allowing history to swallow these women twice, once in life, once in memory? Explain yourself in the comments. Speak, bear witness. Even in words, remembrance is resistance. Silence is not safety. Forgetting is not innocence. And those who never came back are still watching through memory, still counting the witnesses who refuse to remember. History tells many stories. But some stories are softened, some stories are reshaped. Some stories, like those of the women who endured, labored, resisted, disappeared, are compressed, glossed over, or erased entirely. The reasons are rarely neutral. They are political, convenient, expedient. Frontier mythology plays its part. Tales of conquest, expansion, and survival are celebrated. Brutality is romanticized when it serves national narratives. But the labor, the endurance, The systematic erasure of identity suffered by women is rarely included. These details disrupt the neat stories of progress, of heroism, of civilization. They complicate the simplicity of legend, and complexity is inconvenient. Gendered silence compounds this effect. Women's voices, especially those of captives, were rarely recorded. Their pain, their endurance, their resistance, these were deemed anecdotal, peripheral, or irrelevant. Chroniclers focused on armies, treaties, and kings, while women's suffering was deemed unworthy of history's ink. Their absence was normalized. Their experiences were rendered invisible. The result is a minimized record. Brutality appears less systematic than it was. Labor appears incidental, punishment appears sporadic, disappearance appears exceptional. The full architecture of control, the labor, the violence, the sexual domination, the psychological reshaping, is obscured by the bias of record keepers. History becomes a softened reflection, a sanitized mirror, designed to comfort the present while erasing the uncomfortable truths of the past. Understanding this is crucial. Recognizing the forces that shape the stories we inherit restores credibility to the ones erased. It forces us to confront why we never heard of these women, why their endurance was not celebrated, why their suffering was not integrated into the canonical narratives of conquest or survival. And for those watching, reading, bearing witness now, ask yourself, if history has already erased them once, will you allow it to erase them again? Will you accept the softened version without challenge, without acknowledgement, without recognition of truth? Every unexamined narrative you consume risks perpetuating the same injustice, the same silence, the same erasure. The women who endured, who resisted, who disappeared, they were not exceptions. They were not peripheral. They were central to the mechanics of control, to the architecture of survival, and to the lessons of power that history has chosen to minimize. To remember them fully is to resist the softening, to reclaim their presence, and to confront the truth they were forced to live. And the story does not end here. The echoes of labor, of violence, of identity erasure, of motherhood lost, of freedom denied, they extend into every telling that omits, every silence that ignores, every observer who looks away. Understanding why history softened their story is not closure. It is an invitation to witness fully, to remember deliberately, and to confront complicity in both past and present. Captivity is the sentence that never ends. There is no trial, there is no judge, there is no release date. The women are condemned not for crime, not for defiance, not for guilt, but for existence itself. Their suffering is not proportionate, it is absolute. Their punishment is embedded in every movement, every glance, every task, every day. Bodies are no longer their own. They are instruments of labor, of obedience, of hierarchy. Limbs carry weight far beyond capacity. Backs bend under repetition that erases strength, yet preserves compliance. Scars are left not to signal past resistance, but to declare ownership. Every mark is a reminder that autonomy has been stripped. Names are stripped. Identity is repurposed. The woman who once held a name with meaning now carries a label assigned to her by the camp. Memory is rearranged. Selfhood is restructured. To call her by her birth name risks disobedience. To accept her imposed name is to accept erasure. Children, when born, are either tools or reminders of absence. Mothers are punished not for failure, but for attachment. Separation becomes the medium through which the hierarchy reinforces itself, reminding every woman that even creation does not grant immunity from control. The future is a ledger of losses, measured not in days or years, but in opportunity stolen, autonomy denied, and identity overwritten. Punishment here exists without crime. No act of rebellion is required. No law has been broken. The very state of being female, captive, human is deemed sufficient for suffering. The architecture of captivity itself is the sentence. Labor, ritual, observation, and erasure converge to make compliance inevitable and suffering inescapable. This is why the story belongs here, on a channel devoted to the darkest punishments in history. Not because the blows are spectacular, not because the labor is extreme, not because the cruelty is visible, but because the punishment is total, because it is silent, systematic, and enduring, because it teaches lessons far beyond the immediate, embedding control into mind, body, and identity. The camp is a sentence without reprieve. Every aspect of life, the body, the name, the children, the very conception of a future, is controlled, observed, and exploited. Survival does not erase punishment. Endurance is itself punishment. And the lesson is clear. Captivity is punishment without adjudication, without trial, without end. To witness this, to understand it fully, is to confront the depth of human cruelty and the fragility of autonomy. And that is why it counts, explicitly, as punishment, the ultimate lesson in control, obedience, and erasure. In the end, the captives become witnesses, not victims. Every bruise, every scar, every scarred hand that bore weight too heavy to carry, every limb bent under labor, every moment of compliance and endurance, they are not just signs of suffering. They are testimony. Each woman carries knowledge of the system, of the hierarchy, of the mechanisms of control. They remember what history chose to forget. They live as witnesses to a reality that no record fully captures. Survival is not victory. Endurance is not liberation. To live is to bear the weight of what was endured, to carry forward the lessons of pain, labor, and erasure, and to navigate a world that may never acknowledge the full extent of that suffering. Survival marks a continuation, not a triumph. Escape does not erase the imprint of captivity. Return does not restore the self that was taken. The body lives, but the identity has been rewritten, measured, and conditioned into compliance. Historical memory is a responsibility. To understand the architecture of cruelty, to witness labor, punishment, erasure, sexual control, and the obliteration of motherhood is to confront the past with honesty. To honor the experience of those who lived it is to resist the softening of history, to refuse the comforting myths, and to insist on remembrance where erasure was once the norm. The story is not abstract. It is a ledger of reality. It is a warning, a lesson, a call to bear witness. This is why this channel exists. Because the darkest punishments in history were not always written into law. They were not always recorded in chronicles or immortalized in stories of kings, generals, or conquests. Some punishments were lived quietly, invisibly, methodically, until death claimed the body and history claimed the memory. To watch, to read, to listen is not passive. It is acknowledgement. It is engagement. It is an act of responsibility. And the women, the captives, the forgotten, through their endurance, their suffering, their observation, remain quietly as the truest historians of the horrors imposed upon them. Here in their story there is no triumph, there is no redemption, there is only witness, there is only understanding, and the lesson is clear. Punishment can be absolute without being codified, cruelty can be total without spectacle, and survival can be its own quiet sentence. For those who remain silent, for those who turn away, remember this: to forget is a second death. To witness without acknowledgement is to participate in erasure. The responsibility lies with the observer, not only with the executed, the laborer, the erased. The channel exists to record, to preserve, and to honor these truths. Some punishments were written into law, some were enforced publicly, but some, the darkest ones, were lived quietly until death, until memory faded, until the body and the self were overwritten, until the world forgot them entirely. And now their witness exists here for you, for anyone who is willing to confront it fully, to see, to remember, to bear witness. This is the closest we can come to justice. This is why the stories must be told. This is why the channel exists. Because history did not record every pain, civilization did not protect every life, and survival, when stripped of autonomy, identity, and memory, is a sentence without reprieve, quiet, methodical, and total. This is the darkest punishment, and it is real.